Now we proceed for the next speaker. It is our privilege to introduce our doctor, or she's Professor Anandi Ravinath. She received MS in Biotechnology from IIT Bombay, and she's an advisor and member of Council of Advisors for Taksha's Institute of Yoga Therapy and Meditation in USA. She worked for pharmaceutical and biotechnological companies in Germany and India. And Anandi, Professor Anandi's topic is Journey into Mind, DNA, Consciousness. Yes, I request to Professor Anandi for your talk, please.
Thank you so much, Madam, for this introduction. And firstly, I would like to thank respected Bhakti Madhavapuri ji and Bhakti Krishna Keshava Das ji for giving me this opportunity to talk on this platform. And a wonderful good evening to all the eminent speakers and dignitaries. And before shall I start sharing my screen?
Yes, you can. Please.
Okay. So everybody can see the screen, right?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So I would like to begin with my journey into this meditation. Biotechnology was my academic background, and after that, for several years, I was working with corporates, multinational biotechnology companies, and a sudden enlightenment happened. Uh, and meditation started happening very deeply inside me when I met my spiritual master Kumar Krishnamurti ji, who has authored this book Inner Light Cosmic Meditation. And so my journey into meditation started after when I started helping him in this book. This book is not a handwritten book. Just like the Vedas and Upanishads were spoken by the ancient rishis, and then it got recorded. Similarly, this book, Inner Light Cosmic Meditation, was spoken by my spiritual master Kumar Krishnamurti ji during his deep state of meditation, and the whole thing got recorded in cassettes. And I got an opportunity to hear those tapes and transcribe it for him. And that's how my journey into meditation started. And over several years, when I started helping him in his workshops and his meditation activities, I found that a lot of people who were attending his sessions were getting healed. And since my background was biotechnology, I started thinking in terms of if meditative energies are healing the body physical, they have to have an impact at the molecular level, at the DNA level. So that's how my quest in this process started. And many of the speakers whom I have heard since the session started, have said that a lot of knowledge gets downloaded inside you from the cosmic consciousness. And that's what happened with me. And I started getting various insights about what is happening at the molecular level when a person meditates, and even in his natural state of being. And over a period of time, these messages started. I mean, I started journaling all these messages, and I substantiated that with the already existing scientific experimental work, and that's how my book, Mind Your DNA, was born. In fact, even the title was revealed to me when I was deeply in a meditative state. I saw the title very clearly, and so I would say that I was given the title by the cosmic consciousness, by the all intelligent cosmic consciousness. So first, let us understand what is consciousness. Consciousness, a lot of people have spoken about it, written about it, but What I'm going to be telling today is out of pure experience. So whatever I'm going to be sharing is purely experiential. According to me, consciousness cannot be trapped in equations, in mathematical formulae, or any physical or chemical equations. It cannot be trapped in textbook into words, and it cannot be understood through any of our sense organs. You cannot feel the touch of, you cannot see consciousness, you cannot hear consciousness. It has to be experienced when you go into a deep transcendental state, when you go into a state of meditation where you are able to transcend your physical body, when you are able to transcend your the weight of your body, you kind of go into a weightless state. And that is the state you will feel the presence of consciousness around you, inside you, and you will understand, you will realize that you are actually being held in a the entire universe is held in a soup of consciousness. And consciousness, we all have this identified by this individual consciousness which is there inside all of us, which is associated with a mind. And this mind is a very unique tool given to each of us. And we are different because our individual consciousness is associated with a mind which is very highly individualistic. And any thought, any emotion that goes on in our mind has an impact in the gene expression. We will be discussing the epigenomic studies that have been carried out by various people in later slides. So every emotion, every thought that goes on in our mind has an impact in the gene expression. So which means mind is closely associated with DNA. And mind is a tool which can communicate with our individual consciousness. So there is a constant communication between the mind, DNA, and consciousness. So this is what we are going to discuss today. Uh, Let us try to understand what is mind. Till now, mind has been considered to be an abstract entity with no structure or form. But everybody talks of mind power. Mind is supposed to be a very powerful tool given to us. And any positive, if we want to transform our lives, we can do so by positive thinking. But what exactly is mind? It's a collection of huge amount of data. And what is that data? This data is nothing but memories and experiences that have happened to us right from our birth. In fact, in Hinduism, we believe that we are all born with a set of samskaras from our earlier life. So these samskaras are nothing but experiences from our this birth and also from our past birth. So our characteristic features, our behavioral features like actions, beliefs, reflexes, responses to various situations, everything is dependent on this samskaras that is stored in our mind, the memory that is stored in our mind. Now, what is this memory composed of? In fact, I would like to describe mind as a complex network of thoughts, because each and every experience that is stored in our mind, which is the experiences which are embedded in our mind, they're a collection of emotions, and each emotion is a collection of thoughts. So I would like to describe mind as a complex network of thoughts. Now, if we go by this famous equation given to us by Sir Albert Einstein, E is equal to mc square, matter and energy can never be created, neither can they be destroyed, but they can be converted from one to each other. Energy can be converted into matter, and matter can be converted into energy. So, if we go by that, mind is a very powerful energy tool given to us by nature. So mind has to have a matter form. Similarly, DNA is a subtle matter. It is composed of this nucleotides ATGC in various permutations and combinations. And we all know that in the human genome, it is made up of 3.3 billion base pairs. So DNA is a subtle matter. So it has to also have a energy component to it. Now, as per the ancient Vedas and Upanishads, in fact, I would like to refer to this Prashna Upanishad from the Atharva Veda, where the students seek answers from their guru, and the guru tells them that every creation in this universe is associated with a matter and energy component, and every matter has got a name and form attribute to it. Now, what does this name mean? Name implies the chemical and the physical properties of that matter, whereas uh, form denotes the three-dimensional structure of that matter with a lot of information or data stored in that three-dimensional structure. So if we go by that, again, we come to the same point. Mind, which is a huge energy module inside of us, has to have a structure and has to have a form. Same goes with DNA. DNA is a subtle matter, so it has to have an energy component associated with it. Now, if you think about it, just like we do video recording of various incidents through our mobile, similarly, it looks like the mind is constantly video recording various of our experiences, and it is storing it as memories. Now, every emotion has got a expression on the outward. We have a facial expression. We are not able to hide our facial expression. When we are happy, when we are sad, it shows very easily on our face. Similarly, it has to have an expression or a format in which it is stored inside of us. And the prerequisite to store any information is a format and a medium. Like in the ancient days, when people had to store information, paper was the medium. And we have almost 3,000 scripts, 3,000 types of 3,000 different languages in the world, each having its own script. So the information or data used to be stored in the paper in the respective languages. And once the computer era started, then we had medium like magnetic tapes, then there were floppy disks, then the CDs and the DVDs, then the pen drives. Now we have the cloud storage. So any kind of data needs the prerequisite of there has to be a medium in which it has to be stored. There needs to be a format, a certain format to store the data. So while mind is a huge data bank, DNA is a giant nanomolecule. It's a highly intricate molecule because into a nucleus which is just a 2 millionth of a pinhead, nearly 2 meters of DNA is tightly wound around itself and around the histone proteins, and it is so compactly packed. And it's only 120 times narrower than the shortest visible spectrum, the violet light, and still it is so compactly packed and kept inside the nucleus. So it's a highly intricate molecule, but it is a giant nanomolecule because 2 meters of DNA is stored inside a nucleus, which is 2 millionth of a pinhead. Now, let us relook at this Human Genome Project, which was a mega scale project, almost a decade long project, started in the year 1990 and concluded in the year 2003. Now, uh, uh, the main purpose of this project was to sequence the entire DNA and codify the various parts of DNA which were causing various diseases or some health issues and come out with therapies to cure the same. However, at the end of the project, they realized that only 2% of the human genome codes for proteins, the structural and the functional protein. The remaining 98% were non-coding, didn't have any purpose, or initially they even labeled it as junk DNA. And they found that the human genome consists of 3.3 billion base pairs of this ATGC in various permutations and combinations. Now, the other very interesting finding was in this 2% of coding region, man and mouse were 99.9% alike. It was almost like evolutionarily, the genetic code has been preserved in various across the species in various organisms. So nature must have had a purpose. On the lighter note, I would like to say perhaps nature knew that man is going to use mouse as a model for all his genetic experiments. So he would need an organism to try out all his experiments. Anyway, so it's very interesting that evolutionarily, nature has got a mechanism to preserve things which it wants to preserve. Now, I would like to refer to this studies by Barbara McClintock. In the year 1940s, she discovered that there were mobile genetic elements which, huge chunks of the chromosome were able to move from one part of the chromosome to another part and cause various changes in the gene expression. And she even named them as transposons. Now, post genome project, there have been a lot of scientific studies where they have found that this 98% of non-coding DNA has got nearly 45% of that 98% non-coding DNA consists of these transposons, which are these mobile genetic elements. So there is some mechanism, some intelligent mechanism which is working, which is able to change the gene expression whenever it wants to, whenever it wills. Now, I would say that the most interesting part of this Human Genome Project was when the results were declared at the White House by the then President Bill Clinton. He made a remark that perhaps we are trying to learn the language in which God created life. I feel there's a lot of truth in this statement because, as per the Hindu scriptures, as per all the Vedas and Upanishads, we are made up of three types of bodies: the Sthula Sharira, the gross body, the Sukshma Sharira, which is the energy body, and the Karana Sharira, which is beyond the energy body, which is made up of pure consciousness, pure light, photons. So, this 2% of coding, I mean, the entire genome, they found that only 2% codes for protein. It codes for the gross body. So our gross body is only 2% of our entire being. The 98% of our unmanifest being is our energy body, which has to be understood via meditation. Now, is consciousness intrinsic to DNA? Yes, it is intrinsic to DNA, and this was revealed to me during my deep state of meditation. I would like to quote this shloka from the Bhagavad Gita, which is in chapter 13 and verse number 33. In fact, one of the speakers, Bhakti Nishkama, Shanti Nishkama, he referred to this shloka. So the shloka goes like this: Yata prakashayatyekam kritsnam lokamimam ravihi kshetram kshetri tata kritsnam prakashayati bharata. So the meaning of the shloka is, just as the sun illuminates the entire solar system, similarly the soul illuminates the entire body with the light of consciousness. And I would like to extrapolate it a little bit. We are The human body is made up of over 100 trillion cells. So the soul illumines this 100 trillion cells through the DNA, which is a representative of our individual consciousness. In fact, DNA is a live molecule. It is associated with this all intelligent consciousness. I have shown a small clip of this DNA replication, which is happening in kind of picoseconds or femtoseconds. Nearly 3.3 billion, I mean, the entire length of 3.3 billion base pairs are replicated within a short period of few seconds. So and it is done in a very foolproof manner without any errors. And this can happen only if DNA is associated with a all intelligent consciousness. Consciousness is the all intelligent which encompasses all of us. It is surrounding us, it is within us, it is there in our DNA, it is there in all the atoms and molecules which are there in the biomolecules, and it is also there in the space within the protons and the neutrons. So so there is a continuum field of consciousness which is holding our entire body together. We are made up of 100 trillion cells. There are nearly 215 types of cells in our human body. Now, each of these cells has got the same complete blueprint of our genome. Still, the cells behave so differently. In our heart, the cells help the pumping of the blood. In the lungs, the cells help the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Whereas in stomach, they help in digestion of food. So they perform such varied types of functions. Structurally, they are different. Functionally, they are different. So who controls it? There is an all-intelligent consciousness which is associated with this DNA. That is what is the master controller. So DNA is a live molecule and it represents our all-intelligent individual consciousness. So the DNA is constantly emitting this light, which is so there is a kind of light which is surrounding this DNA. We will be discussing this in the other slides. So there is also a kind of light or the bioenergy field which is surrounding us, and this bioenergy field is nothing but the light of our individual consciousness, which we would kind of realize when we are able to hold our mind in a state of silence. So now so DNA as a storage instrument is being studied by various scientific communities. So in fact, they have found that 1 gram of DNA can store about 455 hexabytes of information, which is very huge. They're able to store the information, but they are not able to retrieve it, and that's how the research is still going on. Now, if we look at any language, for example, let us consider the English language. There are 26 alphabets. By themselves, these alphabets don't make any sense. But if you bring 2 or 3 alphabets together, it forms a word and it makes sense. When you string together few words, you get a sentence and it makes more sense. When you have a few sentences together put in a paragraph, then it makes more sense. So it conveys a meaning. Similarly, and that has been in the computer language, it uses the chip level language, the machine language uses the binary digits 0 and 1, and in 8 bits or 16 bits. So in various permutations and combinations of the 0 and 1, all these 26 English alphabets and the numbers can be codified using this 0 and 1 in various permutations and combinations. Similarly, it looks like DNA must be using, mind is perhaps using these nucleotides ATGC in various permutations and combinations in various three-dimensional structures to store information. So the primary structure of DNA has been extensively studied. In fact, the main outcome of studying the primary structure of DNA is the sequencing, which has led to a lot of development and sophistication in terms of instrumentation. So we have the next generation sequencing. And I would like to quote a statement made by Dr. Eric Weiner, who is a very famous oncologist from US. He has even made a statement that the sequencing of DNA has led to a huge amount of data. So our ability to create the amount of data has far outpaced our ability to understand what the data is conveying. So the sequencing of DNA has led to a lot of data, but we still don't understand what that data conveys. There is a small group of scientists who have been doing meticulously research on the biophotons. These are ultra-fine emissions, and they have identified that these are coming out from the DNA. In fact, I've quoted this reference from this Journal of Integrative Neuroscience, where they have found that for every neuronal firing, along with the electrical signal, it is associated with a release of biophotons. And still a lot of research needs to be done in this area. So perhaps DNA in its subtle matter form is a mind, and DNA in its energy or light photonic state represents the individual consciousness. So there is a constant communication between mind, DNA, and consciousness. Uh, we have this Dr. Alexander Gurvich, a Russian scientist. He was a development biologist. In the year 1923, he discovered this. He was the first one to discover these biophoton emissions, and he identified that these are coming from the DNA of the cells. However, the mainstream scientists, he didn't get much recognition. His work didn't get much recognition from the mainstream scientists. But his work was later on taken forward by Dr. Albert Popp from Germany in the early 70s, who he designed the very sophisticated instruments to detect these biophotons. These biophotons, are very fine, ultra fine emissions, very difficult to detect. They fall in the visible spectrum, but they need highly sophisticated instruments to measure them. And biophotons emissions, they have information of nearly 4 MB. Each biophotons carries information of nearly 4 MB, which is 4,000 kilobytes. Now, Dr. Fritz Albert Popp even concluded that these biophotons are kind of light photons which are stored inside the nucleus, to be specific, in the DNA. And he felt that the cell morphogenesis, the cell differentiation, the cell growth, everything was controlled by these biophotons. Biophotons are like information molecules. They have a lot of information, and that intelligent information which is stored in the biophoton is what is helping the cells in the growth and differentiation and in the spatial organization of various tissues and organs. When the zygote from a single cell, from a single zygote, when the cell multiplies and a complete organism is formed, that intelligence which is required for the formation of that organism is stored in these biophotons. Now, Dr. Albert Popp is no more, and his work is being continued by Dr. Roland van Wijk, and he has taken it still further, and I will be discussing his work in one of the future slides. Dr. Peter Marser, British physicist, and German mathematician Walter Kemp, they also wrote a paper in the quantum model of neuron in the quantum holography. They wrote a paper related to quantum computing, and they proposed that DNA is a live radio device which is constantly emitting and absorbing, giving out signals and also receiving signals. And according to them, the base pairs, the carrier, each base pair creates a carrier wave in the three-dimensional format, three-dimensional holographic format, and it stores a lot of information. So they also proposed that these carrier waves are able to give out laser-like uh, beams, and the information transfer is taking place through these laser-like emissions coming out from these carrier waves in the DNA. And the intranuclear communication, the intercellular communication, internuclear communication, and the intracellular communication across the cells, across the chromosomes of different cells, all that was possible because of these laser-like signals that is being emitted by these DNA, the base pairs in the DNA. And they proposed in their paper that human DNA is like a stack of millions of CDs with information of your biography. So it's like your life story is stored in the DNA. Now, what is the information that is stored in the DNA? It is nothing but memories, emotions, and thoughts are stored in the three-dimensional wave format. The other interesting work I would like to quote is by Russian scientist Dr. Peter Garyev. He was a modern wave geneticist, and along with linguistic experts and molecular biologists and cell biologists, they found that there is a biological language hidden in the DNA. And the grammar that is followed, it follows a kind of a grammar in the DNA, which is similar to the syntax that is followed by the DNA, is similar to the grammar of a normal language. And according to him, DNA can be reprogrammed by the human speech when the words are modulated on correct carrier frequencies. So in Hinduism, we have lots of mantras specific to cure a lot of health issues. And when the intonation and the pronunciation of those mantras are very important, are given very much a lot of importance, because when the sounds come out with a particular with a correct frequency, it has a positive impact in the DNA and it corrects the gene expression at the DNA level. In fact, I would like to say that meditation is a maha mantra because it is a silent prayer to the uh, invisible uh, God. I would like to quote here another interesting work done by Dr. Vladimir Poponin. He was a Russian scientist, and he used the Casimir effect. There was a Dutch scientist, Dr. Hendrik Casimir, who found that vacuum is not really vacuum. It is teeming with electromagnetic radiation and it is teeming with millions of photons. So Dr. Vladimir Poponin created a vacuum kind of a situation in which he inserted the DNA, and he found that the photons which are there in the electromagnetic field inside the vacuum are able to align themselves in the same shape as the DNA. And even after the removal of the DNA, they retained their shape. So, which means DNA is a molecule, is a live molecule which is able to communicate with the surrounding photons. Now, this same experiment was also done by Dr. Luc Montagnier in water. He realized that he did experiments to prove that DNA is able to communicate with the water. I mean, the photonic signals which are left by the DNA in the water is able to get recorded in the water molecule. Luc Montagnier received a Nobel Prize in the year 2008 for his work on HIV. However, when he diverted to his work to this kind of a science where he wanted to find out how DNA is able to leave a photonic imprint, he was named as a, I mean, he didn't get much recognition for this work. However, I think that this work is very, very important because it is able to we are able to understand that DNA is not just a string of bases, it is a live molecule, it is associated with consciousness. In fact, I would like to say that DNA is that one molecule in our body which can communicate with the surrounding consciousness, which it can communicate with our cosmic consciousness. I would like to quote the work of Dr. Masuro Emoto, Japanese scientist. He did a lot of work on water molecules. He used to take these pictures of this. He had developed instrumentations to uh, take out pictures of these water crystals. And he found that water is a huge reservoir of consciousness and it can store the memory of our thoughts. So the information in our DNA can be transmitted in the form of electromagnetic emissions and it can be stored in the water. And all the positive emotions like love, compassion, and gratitude had an impact on the water molecule, and beautiful crystalline structures were formed. And the opposite was also true. I have given the picture of this water molecules which was impregnated with disgust, emotions like disgust, anger, and hatred. Whereas with love, compassion, and gratitude, you get very beautiful pictures of these water molecules. Now, again, I would like to quote here Dr. Masuro Emoto wrote a book called The Messages of Water, Messages of Water, which was a bestseller in New York. But the time he got started getting recognition for his work in the year 2012, 2014, he passed away. And he was initially labeled as pseudoscientist. However, I would like to say that anything which is not he was not a pseudoscientist, he was an esoteric scientist. Anything which is not understood by instrumentation or by our observation doesn't mean that it is pseudoscience, it is esoteric science. Now, again, coming back to the same, a lot of study has been done on the primary structure of DNA. But what is essential is we need to understand the secondary and the tertiary structure of DNA. And I have quoted a paper over here, which is as late as 2022, which was published in Nature. So now scientists have started realizing that the three-dimensional structure of DNA plays a very important role in diseases. They have found that cancer cells are able to modify the three-dimensional structure of the DNA in a way that it is able to control the gene expression for its survival. So three-dimensional structure, how does it change? It changes because the gene expressions are controlled. And this happens because uh, it is all, everything is controlled by our thoughts and emotions. So a lot of studies have been done on epigenome. Epigenome is basically introducing this DNA, and the DNA gets methylated, or there are these proteins, histone proteins get modified, and that controls the gene expression. Now, there is a lot of paper where they have implicated that emotions are inducing these epigenetic changes. In fact, there was a scientist from John Hopkins who even observed in his scientific studies that these epigenetic changes, stress is inducing the epigenetic changes. So stress is nothing but various thoughts and emotions. So various thoughts and emotions are inducing these epigenetic changes. Now, there is also a lot of work where people have observed that meditation relaxes the mind and impacts the DNA positively. And the entire genetic profile changes when a person starts practicing meditation regularly. There is improved efficiency of the mitochondrial powerhouse. It upregulates a lot of genes which help in the immune response, and it downregulates the gene which causes inflammation and stress hormones. So stress agitates the mind and impacts the DNA negatively, whereas meditation relaxes the mind and impacts the DNA positively. So basically what happens is there is a pharmacy inside of us which gets stimulated when a person starts practicing meditation. So whenever there is a stressful event in our life, it is our mind which gets impacted first before the body physical starts feeling its impact. Same is the case with meditation. When we start practicing meditation regularly, the clarity is first felt in the mind before we start feeling the relaxation and the healthy feeling in our body. So which means mind and DNA are closely connected. So this is another scientific link, that DNA and mind is in our DNA and DNA is in our mind. So what exactly is the information that is stored in our DNA? It is the thoughts, and thoughts and emotions are stored in our DNA. In fact, we need to understand, this was also revealed to me when I was during my deep state of meditation, that thoughts are photonic in nature. They are photonic in nature, and they are like so since they are like subatomic particles, the principles of quantum physics applies on thoughts. Nobody has done any research on thoughts, but thoughts behave like both wave-like and particle-like nature, and the principle of quantum entanglement applies to thoughts. That is why when two people are connected through their thoughts, any change in the thought process of one person affects the thought process of the other person. In fact, that is what is quantum entanglement all about, and that is applicable with thoughts. I would like to quote this shloka from the Prashna Upanishad, uh, which says, Atmana esha prano jayate, yathesha purushe chayai etasmin etatatam, manokritena ayat asmin sharire. So what does this shloka mean? Here again, the student is asking his guru as to where do thoughts arise from? And his guru is telling him thoughts arise from our individual consciousness, and it gets passed on. Chayai etasmin etadatatam. It gets passed through the mind, and the mind filters it and then passes it on to the physical body. For example, we get a thought, a brilliant creative thought, which arises from our individual consciousness. The individual consciousness passes it on to our mind. Now, depending upon the samskaras which are stored in our mind, the already existing thoughts and emotions in our mind processes that thought. So, if we are pessimistic in nature, we may not go ahead with that creative idea and it will just fizzle out. But if we are a positively oriented person, we will keep thinking about it and will come up with more creative ideas to execute that idea. So mind filters any creative thought that we get has arisen from our individual consciousness, from our self. But the limiting thoughts are created by our mind because of the samskaras, the emotions and the memories that are stored in our mind. Now, uh, here I would like to also say that every innovation that has happened right from the stone age till this age of digital era, everything has happened when man has kept his mind momentarily in a state of silence, in a state of non-thought. So when the mind is kept in a state of non-thought, the man becomes highly creative. All the creative thoughts enter him when he is able to hold his mind in a state of non-thought. After that, he can process those thoughts, uh, like the creative thought has risen from his individual consciousness, it is passed on to his mind, and then the mind processes it. So every discovery, every invention that has happened right from stone age till this era has happened when that particular man or woman has kept their mind in a state of in a meditative state. So biophotons, thoughts, it's also called as prana in our Hindu scriptures, is like an interface between mind and consciousness. Now, so consciousness, I had mentioned earlier that Dr. Fritz Alfred Popp had said that biophoton field exhibits like a consciousness, like a coherence, and that coherence is able to is a intelligent field, intelligent light field starting from our DNA. It encompasses our entire physical body, and Dr. Roland Van Wijik went a step further, who is now the head of the director of the the International Institute of Biophotons. He has conducted research where he has seen the biophoton emissions from uh, people who are into a state of meditation. And he actually has found that the biophoton emissions have come down in a person who is meditating, which means what these biophotons are actually thought particles, the thought particles emitted by our mind.
Ms. Ravinath, if you can please conclude in 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm almost through. Yes.
Yes,
So
there
is also a group of people who have discovered that, who have observed that biophoton emissions from the neuron when it signals any electrical, when it signals any, gives out any signal, it is associated not only with an electrical signal, it is also associated with a biophotonic emission. So our genome is an MP3 file of a three-dimensional movie. And that movie is our life story. Our genome is a quasi-intelligent system, and every living organism is made up of an energy aspect and also a matter aspect, energy information and matter information. And the morphogenetic field surrounding all the living organisms, that bioenergy field is nothing but a thought field, and that is the intelligent field. So a lot of research has gone into understanding what is DNA. I think a lot of research can be, the research needs to be modified and given a different dimension if every scientist, every doctor also starts practicing meditation, he will get a different insight into how he should take his work forward. So, as quoted by the famous scientist Nicholas Tesla, if we start thinking in terms of energy, if we start thinking in terms of we as an energy module, we will be able to discover a lot of truth about life. I would like to share this picture of my spiritual master, Dhyan Guru Kumar Krishnamurti ji, who has authored this book, Inner Light Cosmic Meditation. And he had a very profound experience where he was given live darshan of Maharaj, Sri Gajanan Maharaj of Shegaon in the year 1988. Whereas Gajanan Maharaj had already left his physical form, he had taken samadhi in the 1910. But after nearly 80 years, he gave live darshan to Guruji Kumar Krishnamurti ji. In fact, I would like to quote an incident from Sri Gajanan Maharaj's life, which happened in the 1890s. He was a saint who was living in a remote village in Maharashtra, India. And we just now, sometime back, we heard a talk by Bhakti Vijnananda, who spoke about the emotional intelligence of cows. Now, during the lifetime of Gajanan Maharaj, there was this incident which happened where there was a cow which had gone kind of mad. It had become a mad cow and it started attacking all the people around it, all the villagers around it. So they literally put chain shackles around the cow as though they were bringing a tiger, and they brought the cow near Maharaj. Maharaj ordered them to remove the chains and he started patting the cow. Now, the enlightened saint is surrounded by this effulgent consciousness. He becomes light photons. So, in the presence of Maharaj, the cow became so docile. The cow actually became like a cow. So I would like to end my talk, and again I would like to thank all the dignitaries and Bhakti Madhava Puri and Bhakti Krishna Keshavadas ji for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Is consciousness. Is prana. Is select. Is prana.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we have 10 minutes now for a Q&A. And before we take any other comments from the audience, I just wanted to read some of the thoughts that came to my mind when you were presenting based on some of the presentations we saw at the beginning of the conference. So one of the general takeaways from this conference is hopefully the ability to distinguish life from non-life, where non-life is matter. And then only after this initial discrimination can the relationship between matter, life, and consciousness or cognition or mind, depending on what word we use and what our understanding of that is, only after the discrimination between life and non-life can that relationship between matter, life, and consciousness be clearly considered and explained. So DNA doesn't communicate and it's not conscious because it's not alive. DNA is just matter. It is inert matter utilized by the living cell. The cell is cognitive, as we vividly saw in the videos shown by Brian Ford earlier. Barbara McClintock also said that the genome or DNA is actually an organ of the cell. So it's the cell which is cognitive, which is alive and using DNA as a tool because DNA is matter. So Dennis Noble also explained that DNA is not the language of the book of life. A, C, T, and G cannot express meaningful content. They are basically on-off switches utilized by the cell to edit itself based on its environmental circumstances. So all the cognitive activity is coming from the cell. in relation to what it can do with its constituents. So Dr. Bhimadevapuri suggested that when we are trying to consider the relationship between matter and mind, or as Hegel called it and Dr. Puri called the concept and its constituent content, then we should consider the role of negativity. And this approach emphasizes dialectic reason. So every thought is motivated by a necessary predecessing thought. And we can't just contingently string ideas together, but it has to be governed by some type of necessity and reason. So that approach is the opposite, essentially, of what is typically presented today, both inside and outside of materialistic science, where people try to just assert that somehow there's a direct relationship between matter, whether it's a neuron or DNA, and consciousness and mind. They just say somehow the relationship is there automatically. But, that's, first of all, not observed from an empirical level. And then from a philosophical level, there's no necessity that governs such a relationship at all. So I think these ideas need to be very carefully considered when speaking about this topic. And that's all I have to say. Unless Dr. Ms. Ravinath, if you have any response, otherwise we can also hear from the audience any other questions or comments they may have.
Actually, somebody has asked whether prana is similar to consciousness. So that I think I have covered in my talk. Prana is like an interface between mind and consciousness.
Yes, even from the Vedic point of view, the word mind, manas, is as something Dr. Niskam Shanta Maharaj mentioned in his talk. There is a distinction between the gross body and the subtle body within Prakriti. And the subtle body, we don't find that in the West so much. Typically, mind or consciousness or cognition are almost used interchangeably. But from the Vedic wisdom, from the Vedic scriptures, there is quite a lot of detail about the difference between the subtle elements, which include mind, manas, buddhi, intelligence, or ego, false ego, ahamkar. And so those differences described in the Vedic scriptures there are more functional. They're distinguished through their function, where manas is one of the lower forms of the subtle matter, where it's basically described as just distinguishing this or that, where it's not a higher order subtle thinking activity. It's just this or that. And then a higher order buddhi or intelligence then comes to distinguish relationships between this and that, and is a little more dynamic. So the Vedic scriptures, Vedic wisdom itself, they describe the descending, everything is the descending nature from the Vedic scripture. Everything is descending from higher to lower. So the material is coming from the spiritual, and then within the material, it's coming from subtle to gross, more and more determined, further gross. So again, that systematic reason can even be seen there, where it's not just a contingent ideas being strung together, but there's order and system. There's a systematic reasoning behind it. So it's very important for scientific approaches to understanding reality to include these things, this approach.
As I mentioned in the beginning of my talk, a lot of these things got revealed to me during my deep state of meditation. Now, in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it is clearly mentioned that knowledge can be acquired through reading scriptures, knowledge can be acquired through discussions, there is one method when knowledge gets just revealed to you, and that is called as that is like an epiphany, and that revelation happened to me several times during my meditative state, and which I have substantiated with the already existing scientific work, and that's how I have put together this presentation which I shared with you all today.
Yes. So we still have about 3 minutes left in this Q&A session before Dr. Scott Turner presents. Was there any other comments from the audience or questions for Ms. Ravinath? And we certainly appreciate you taking the time to put together the presentation and presenting your ideas to us. If there are no questions, then we can move on to Dr. Scott Turner.